Welcome back to IE Media. Here on episode 23, I'm joined by Brian Townsend, a seasoned law enforcement professional with 28 years of service, including 5 years as a police officer and 23 years as a DEA Supervisory Special Agent. Brian now leads Eagle 6 training, providing expert speaking, training and consulting to law enforcement and businesses globally. He also serves as a law enforcement training coordinator for MOCIC, which is the Mid-States Organised Crime Information Centre, and he also founded 2MG Inc., a 501c3 focused on addressing the opioid crisis. Renowned for his fentanyl expertise, Brian is a frequent voice on Fox, CNN, Forbes, and has appeared on many podcasts, offering critical insights into the drug epidemic. I'm intrigued to learn more about this, and I think it's very important to raise awareness for current and future generations. But first, I'd like to introduce our guest to the show and say thanks for reaching out. And how's it going, Brian?
Good, and thank you for having me. Such an important conversation that we're going to have. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Would you mind giving a little bit of a backstory into maybe earlier life and what inspired you into law enforcement?
Yeah, I spent 28 years in law enforcement. In high school, I made a decision that I wanted to go into law enforcement, specifically drug enforcement. I know that's an odd decision from such a young age, but it was a decision I made early on. I didn't know how I was going to achieve that. I knew that was my dream, but it was pretty murky. You know, it was an interesting journey, but it worked out. I decided to go into law enforcement. Local law enforcement first. I was a police officer in Joplin, Missouri, which is in the southwest corner of the state of Missouri, which beautiful town, beautiful people, great police department. But my dream, like I said, was the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, and I was finally able to achieve that in 1999. And I went to the DEA and spent the next 23 years of my career there. I spent the first 10 years in Arkansas, and then the next almost 7 years in Texas, and then about 4 years in Virginia. And then I returned to Missouri and retired in Springfield, Missouri as the resident agent in charge. So I was in charge of the DEA office in Springfield and the several counties in southwest Missouri that we were responsible for.
So I guess you've seen quite a lot of things then in your time.
A few, yeah. I've seen the impact that drugs have on our communities, and that was a big reason why after my DEA career, I decided to continue this journey of public service, but in a different way.
Being over in Britain, sometimes we see these images on the news of what they call like these fentanyl zombies, and it is quite sad to see people in this zombie-like state. And we're hearing more and more now here in the UK about fentanyl-related deaths. And I know that the United Kingdom is only years away from the United States, isn't it? It's only so far behind. And so I think it's important for people over here to hear your story as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're gonna experience more what we're already seeing in the United States. In 30 years of law enforcement, I've never seen a drug more impactful. I've never seen a drug change the way of life so much like fentanyl has. We still see a lot of heroin in Europe, but it's coming. Fentanyl replaced heroin in the United States. It's a synthetic opioid, and it's the exact same thing's going to happen in Europe. Why mess with heroin when you can get a cheaper synthetic opioid that's more potent and, like I said, cheaper? So that means higher profit margins for the drug traffickers. So unfortunately, it's going to happen worldwide, and it's devastating.
Yeah. Do you have any insight to maybe where it's coming from?
Yeah, so the chemicals to make fentanyl primarily originate from China. They're bought in bulk from Chinese chemical suppliers. India is another large source country for the chemicals, but China by far is number one. And most of those chemicals are shipped to Mexico, to the ports in Mexico, which are controlled by the cartels. The main two cartels in Mexico are the Sinaloa cartel, the CDS, and the Jalisco New Generation, the CJNG. And from there, it's manufactured into fentanyl and then smuggled into primarily the United States.
And it seems to be very potent, doesn't it? Because I was watching a traffic stop of an officer who discovered some in the trunk of a car, and literally within minutes, he's collapsed, hit the ground, and having to call EMS and stuff. So quite dangerous, isn't it, for your officers as well?
It is. It's dangerous, but we've actually been able to understand a lot more about that, and we know now that those officers were not impacted by the fentanyl itself. It was the
Oh,
fear of the fentanyl. Yeah, it's a huge misconception about fentanyl. And in 2016, the DEA, and I love DEA, but in 2016, we kind of led the charge to let law enforcement and the public know that this was a very dangerous drug, and it is a very dangerous drug, and we should respect that. But we
yeah.
went as far as to say that just being around it or, even skin contact could cause an overdose, and we now know that's not true. I'm not minimizing these officers. I'm happy they're okay. I stress the importance of understanding the dangers of the drug and understanding that we need to wear personal protective equipment, PPE. I always wear nitrile gloves when I was around fentanyl, and for that matter, I wore nitrile gloves when I was around any drug or
Yeah.
suspected drug. But it is a dangerous drug, though. I mean, but it has to get into your system, and when it gets into your system, we're only talking about a couple milligrams. That's why I called my nonprofit only 2 mg, and that was
Ah, okay.
to show that only 2 milligrams of fentanyl was enough to kill the average human being. Again, it has to
Wow.
get into the system, but only a couple granules of salt or sand. That's what 2 milligrams is. The number of people dying from other drugs, specifically like methamphetamine and cocaine, is still alarmingly high, and it continues to increase. But fentanyl is the drug that's killing people in the United States. We lost. We don't have the numbers yet for 2024, but it'll probably be right around 100,000 people. So and we
Wow.
know that every year, the fentanyl or the overall drug deaths, fentanyl is about 2/3 of all those deaths is because it's contributed to fentanyl. So to put that in perspective, uh, U.S. football, not soccer, U.S. football,
Wow.
a stadium in the United States is usually around 75, 80,000 people. So when you look at a United States football stadium and you look at all the number of people that fill that stadium, that's about how many folks we lose every single year to one drug.
That's awful, isn't it? And I'm hearing more and more stories now of these criminal gangs that are lacing other drugs with fentanyl. Is that
Yeah.
true, or is that hysteria? Or
No, no,
yeah.
that's absolutely true. So the how fentanyl came into our drug supply, at least in the United States, was through heroin. We saw a spike in heroin use in the late 2000 or early 2000s and 2010s. And so we saw a spike in production of opium and heroin, and then they needed something to cut it with. And fentanyl is an opioid, just as heroin is. So, but like I said, it's synthetic, it's completely man-made, it's cheaper. So they started to put they started to put it into our heroin supply and then eventually just took over. And then they went to the pills, and now we see it in methamphetamine, we see it in cocaine. I've seen a statistic that DEA put out that they now estimate that about 70% of the drug supply is contaminated with fentanyl. That's an incredible amount.
Yeah, that is definitely, and that is something that needs to be known about, isn't it? And I
Yeah, it
can
is.
imagine through the various talks that you do and publications, that's what you're trying to do. And how does that translate to your working with the law enforcement agencies and stuff?
Yeah, so I started only 2MG to work with not just law enforcement, but the public as well. Law enforcement's been my primary audience. I've navigated in that field for 3 decades, and so that's a natural customer base, if you will, for me. But I make these presentations open to everyone, and the idea is to educate and spread awareness and hopefully be a force multiplier. Hopefully people take the information that I provide and they take it back to their families or their communities.
I guess you've also seen the impact of the families, haven't you, especially in your years in law enforcement. And I can only imagine some of the intense operations you've been involved with in trying to bring some of these gangs down and try to take this stuff off the streets. But it seems to be like a never-ending thing, doesn't it, with the drug war? And it's really is out of control, isn't it?
It is. It's devastating how profound the impact has on communities and then on families. We need to. The answer is actually simple. We need to reduce the demand.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
what we have to do, and unfortunately, the demand in the United States is too great. I mean, I can demonize the chemical suppliers and the cartels and the drug traffickers, and as we should, and we should continue to target those folks. But at the end of the day, we have to reduce the demand for drugs. I mean, in the
Yeah.
United States alone, I mean, you look at our population just in the U.S. alone, we're probably about 4% of the global population. Yet most of the drug consumption is here. That's a
Wow.
problem.
Yeah. What do you think drives people to
Hmm.
get involved with it?
Interesting question, hard one. I think a lot of it is a coping mechanism for a lot of stress and trauma
Yeah.
and things that they've experienced in life. We know that from a lot of young people, a lot of research. They're sexual abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse. This is their coping mechanism. Is they turn to drugs and alcohol, and or just simply mental illness. And those are
Yeah.
discussions that we're really not addressing, at least not in this country. We're largely ignoring. We look at drug use as a moral failure. So we don't really throw the resources that we should at getting to the root, to the stem of the problem. We just
Yeah.
continue to patch it.
Yeah. Are you hopeful with the new government in maybe making some progress along that, or is it a stalemate?
Yeah, at least on the enforcement part, I'm not a political person, but I mean, we've had a tremendous amount of movement in the last 2 months. That's been very, very positive for our communities. It really has. I mean, just a couple days ago, we had several cartel members extradited into the United States, like 27, 28 of them, including one that was responsible for the death of a DEA agent, Kiki Camarena. Yeah,
Wow.
he's finally in the United States where, I know this is gonna sound mean, but I hope he takes his last breath in a United States prison.
Yeah. Yeah. That was such a sad case, wasn't it?
Yeah,
That's a
and
shame.
it's just a reminder of how deadly and how violent these organizations are and what they're willing to do to push drugs into our communities. But like I said, in the last few months alone, we've seen a tremendous amount of change. I mean, the cooperation with Mexico has increased a hundredfold in the last few months. And
Yeah.
I'm not part of those negotiations, but whatever our government is doing with the Mexican government and the president down there, Claudia Sheinbaum, it's working, and I hope we continue to see that. And again, I think that's just one piece of this very complex puzzle. I think the other piece is things like what I'm trying to do is raise awareness, and reduce the demand for drugs. So, not have people look for these drugs, and then the enforcement part is to make it harder for them to find them. It's impactful how, drugs are, like I said, at 30 years in law enforcement, never seen a drug this impactful. I mean, it's changed the landscape, drug experimentation. I mean, you look at this generation of young people right now, they can die from experimental drug use. We never had a drug like that in our drug supply before. You tried drugs, when I was in high school, eh, chances of dying were pretty slim. I mean, you'd probably
Yeah.
win the lottery before you ever actually died. And that's a severe consequence for using drugs. And I know like I said, I know some people can be harsh and they'll say things like, well, they should have never tried it. Yeah. The result, at the end of
Yeah.
the day, we're talking about people that, are dying because of experimental drug use. And that's not the acceptable consequence. We need
Yeah.
to get to the root of the problem, figure out why they were using drugs, give them the education, empower them to make decisions so maybe they don't use drugs. And at the same time, like I said, continue to aggressively go after these criminals, these people who prey on us.
Yeah. Do you think that the sentencing and the punishment is severe enough for them? I mean, I don't know anything about any cases or anything, so I'm not too sure, but I'd like to hear your side
Yeah,
on that.
yeah, federal law enforcement has better sentencing than let's say state or local law enforcement in the United States, and that's a big resource that we have. That's a I can't tell you the number of criminals I've dealt with over the years who when they find out we're DEA, when we find out we're federal law enforcement, they're like, oh, because then they're looking at real sentences. It's no longer a slap in the hand
Yeah.
or a 20-year jail sentence that results in a year because of good behavior. You're gonna you're going to spend most of your time in federal prison behind a federal sentence. So we have stronger laws and harsher sentences, and that's a good thing. People should be held accountable. Where the rule of law, it should mean something.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that would deter most sane people, wouldn't it, from even going down that route, even in terms of other drug dealers maybe doing other sorts of things. But yeah, I mean, it's so sad, isn't it, to see the impacts on the communities over the time. I mean, we've seen it back in the 80s, 90s with the crack epidemic, and then you have the methamphetamine thing, especially in the States. And, it's a similar thing here. We still have a lot of heroin addicts and stuff on the streets and crack. And yeah, I watch a lot of these guys on YouTube, that go around the different towns and cities and stuff. And it does seem to be still a major problem. It really does.
It is. It's unfortunate that it seems like every few years or so, there's a new drug or a new trend, and people are willing to put these dangerous chemicals in their body, and it really is sad. And I know we talk about fentanyl because it is such a devastating drug, but we still have problems with the other drugs as well. I mean, methamphetamine is the number one seized drug in the United States, and it's still a problem. So we continue to battle that as well. But the impact has certainly been fentanyl because of the mere fact that 2 milligrams, once it's in your body, can kill you. So when you talk about 100,000 people dying every year and 75,000 of those are because of one drug, one drug, that's why I can say it's so impactful, or more impactful than the other drugs.
Such a huge number, that, isn't it? That should be
It
enough
is.
to scare anyone away from using it, shouldn't it?
I hope. I really
Yeah.
hope. Yeah, when I talk to young people, that's one of the things. Stats usually bore them, but I try to uh, get it through their heads that this is a drug that doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care how often you use it. It'll kill you the first time you use it. If you use too much of it, it'll kill you. And it's snuck into so many of the drugs that they experiment with.
From your knowledge, what other drugs have they, especially in the United States, been like lacing it essentially with that you've heard of?
The pills are a big thing. I mean, like I said, we know the cocaine and methamphetamine. Last year, about 41% of all cocaine seized by law enforcement in the United States had fentanyl in it. About 17% of all methamphetamine seized by law enforcement had fentanyl in it. But the big problem, and of course, heroin. Like I said, it's pretty much replaced heroin. I mean, you can still find heroin, but it's a lot more difficult than it was, just 4 or 5 years ago. But the big pill, to answer your question, or I'm sorry, the big drug would be the pills, and not just opioids, by the way. I mean, if there's a pill, there's a counterfeit. So the big ones we see quite a bit are the Oxys, the Adderalls, the Xanax bars, and there are counterfeits for all these drugs. And so many, or so often of the time, these counterfeits contain fentanyl, methamphetamine, or some type of garbage or other poison that are harming people. Just to give you some perspective, when DEA started testing this, it was about 4 out of 10 pills contained at least 2 milligrams of fentanyl. And then in 2023, it jumped up to 7 out of 10 pills. Now, we've seen a decline as of a couple months ago. We've seen a decline to now it's down to about 5 out of 10 pills have at least 2 milligrams of fentanyl. But the reality is it's still fentanyl and meth and other garbage in our drug supply.
If I understand this right, is this like kind of street dealers in the United States that are selling these pills, kind of pretending that they're prescription pills, but really they're something else, or is it a whole new thing?
No, sometimes they'll tell you they're counterfeit. Sometimes they'll tell you they're real, and their pill presses and their stamps, their dyes. I mean, they'll look real. You can put them side by. You can put a Percocet pills next to a real Percocet pill, and they look real. In fact, it's very difficult to distinguish. In fact, I have slides where I'll put real and fake pills on the slides, and I'll show them to. And I've had medical professionals in the class. I've had kids in the class. I've had all kinds of people in the class who claim they can. Well, they never claim, but they probably would think they could tell the difference, and they get it wrong all the time. And it's nothing against them. It's just the fact that these drug traffickers are making pills to mimic our real drug supply. They want people to believe that they're getting real Percocet, real hydrocodone, real Adderall, real Xanax, or whatever the drug is.
Yeah.
So it's they rarely do you get just a pill that's just a circle or an oval or something like that, and you have no idea what it is. I mean, they're specifically counterfeiting real pills, yet with fake substances and dangerous substances like fentanyl.
And is that purely for profit?
Yes, fentanyl is a very potent drug. It brings back customers. It's like putting sugar in candy, right? You want somebody to come back and want more and more and more. So the question, usually a follow-up question, and it's probably running through your head right now, is why would they put such a dangerous drug in that kills people?
Yeah, because we hear theories in the United Kingdom that they do it to kill people, and then you think, well, if they did it to kill people, then the dealer would be out of business, and so I'm not sure what's going on, but I will take your perspective on that, being an expert in the field.
Yeah, and it's funny because everyone asks the same questions here as well. And the reality is, it's the manufacturers who are making this stuff, they understand how addictive it is. And they want people to come back as repeat customers. To them, if they kill some people off, it's not a big deal because they know they're going to get more repeat customers. It's like this crazy algorithm, if you will. As long as more people are buying it than dying, it doesn't matter. And even though we have a record number of people dying, they still have record sales. These things cost pennies to make. Now, when these trickle down from, let's say, wholesaler to a reseller or a local trafficker, and let's say I'm your drug dealer and you die, I might be a little sad, not because you died, but because now that's a source of income that's no longer going to be coming into me. But a couple levels ahead of me, they don't care because, again, they're looking at it as a pure dollars and cents game. They're saying, okay, yeah, you lost your customer. However, you picked up 3 or 4 new customers, and that's a plus. And at the end of the day, this is all about money. I mean, there's no, trying to help you, trying to make you feel better, trying to make you cope with some type of trauma. This is 100% about greed.
I've heard other ex-addicts say that if they heard that somebody had died off a product on the street, like you're saying, that just made the demand go up because people thought, oh, this is some good stuff, and I can't get my head around that mindset, It's like people died and now they want it. It's crazy. But again, that definitely is some kind of mental health and addiction, isn't it?
I couldn't get my head around it either. I can tell you, at the DEA, I can't tell you the number of times where that exact thing has happened, where let's say it was a purple pill or a purple product. And our informants would literally tell us, hey, the word on the street is everyone wants that purple stuff now. And I'm like, people just died because of it. It doesn't matter. That is absolutely 100% what they want. They demand it. And it's very difficult for anyone to wrap their head around that someone would seek a drug that has proven to kill people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. It really is. Yeah. So, it seems like a battle that you've got on your hands over there in law enforcement, for sure. We have battles ourselves in the United Kingdom with drugs and stuff, but it seems far more serious at the moment, doesn't it, over there?
It is. I mentioned that the number of people die every year. Just to give you some perspective, in the United States, we've been tracking that data since 1968. So we call them drug overdose. I call them drug poisonings. So from 1968 to the year 2000, we lost about 200,000 people in the United States over a 32-year period. That's a lot of people. No one, right? A lot of people. Every year, we now lose 100,000 people every year. So in the last 2 years alone, we lost more people than we did the first 32 years of tracking this data. When I was in high school, we lost 4,000 people a year to drugs. The new normal is 100,000 a year. Last year, the year before, it was 107,543 individuals in the United States. Sons, daughters, neighbors, husbands, wives, and we're happy that those numbers are decreasing. It's probably because of the availability of drugs like naloxone or namifene, but it's still 100,000 people a year. This is having a huge impact. And I hate to say it, I hope I'm wrong. I hope we talk in a year and you tell me that your guys' numbers are still low. That would make me very happy. But unfortunately, I see a trend happening throughout the world, and And it's just a matter of time before you start seeing your death numbers increase as well.
So when sadly there is these deaths, does that then open up new investigations and then usually lead to whoever supplied that going to jail, or do you have a lot of cases where they never found who supplied it?
Well, unfortunately, yes and yes.
Yes,
So
yeah,
So ideally, you have law enforcement that's going to work these cases and look at these as deaths resulting from the drug that was sold. And I would hope that law enforcement would aggressively go after these drug traffickers that are killing other people. The reality of it is the prosecution numbers on those are pretty low in the United States. They really are. And I think for a variety of reasons. Unfortunately, and I love this profession, but unfortunately, they're not as investigated. They're not investigated as aggressively as they may, let's say, your typical murder.
yeah,
There's still the stigma that, hey, they did this to themselves. They used drugs, and this is the consequences of their action. And I know that sounds cold, and I certainly doesn't go for all law enforcement, but I have seen that. I've seen a lot of folks who just don't put the time into these investigations. But I think that that tide is changing. I really do. I think as we educate and understand the problem that law enforcement is doing more and more and more. So that's a positive, an absolute positive. Problem is, and quite frankly, these investigations are very difficult to do. They really are. I mean, your victim's dead. You know, the person who used the fentanyl or the drug is gone. So now we're relying on, phones and other evidence and perhaps an interview with a suspected drug trafficker, and then from that investigation you give it to a prosecutor's office, and he or she can make a decision that they don't think the evidence is strong enough. I can think of a couple cases that I was personally involved with where unfortunately, it came down to the prosecution decision, and that's where the case ended, and it was unfortunate. But I truly do see a turn in opinion, at least in the law enforcement. So I'm hoping that these drug traffickers will be held more accountable
yeah.
for their actions.
If the prosecution is successful, what sort of punishment can they be looking at, especially if people have died from something they've supplied?
Yeah, it really just depends. It depends on the jurisdiction. So, in the U.S., we have different levels of prosecution. So, in the federal system, again, you're going to have a lot more resources, a lot more laws available to you. So, the sentencing is going to be a little bit more severe than, let's say, a state jurisdiction or state jurisdiction. So,
Yeah,
really just depends.
yeah, of
But
course.
I think with the public opinion and the information going out more and more and people understanding, what's happening and the fact that this is impacting so many people, I think more and more people are demanding that law enforcement and the criminal justice system hold people accountable that are killing others with these deadly pills and these deadly drugs, I
Yeah.
should say.
And I suppose if you spread that awareness so everybody knows, then these guys are clearly making a conscious decision to put this stuff on the street, aren't they? So
They are.
they
It's
should
all about
expect
money.
harsh punishment. Yeah. Yeah, it's very sad. It
Yeah,
is.
so it's very profitable business. These cartels make you know billions of dollars on this stuff. These pills, these fentanyl pills cost pennies to make, like literally pennies to make. So,
Wow.
and by the time they hit the streets, depending on where and how you buy them, you might spend $25-$30 on a pill. It's a substantial markup.
Yeah, that is very scary, isn't it? Something so cheap can be so deadly. That is. I mean, do you think that it's also down to where this stuff's coming from as well? Should they not be doing more to stop it leaving their countries and flooding? What? Some would say there's a little bit of a conspiracy going on, but I don't know. I'm sure it's way deeper than that.
Yeah, I'm absolutely. I hope that we have to look at it. We have to look at the entire supply chain, and we have to go at it at all angles. And China, China is a threat. China is the number one source country for these chemicals. They're not doing nearly enough to curb it. I know when President Trump was, in his first term in office, he talked to President Xi, and at that time they were sending finished product to places like, like Mexico, and he said, okay, we'll no longer send the finished product. And then he turned around and kind of winked at his chemical suppliers and said, just send them the chemicals, let them finish it now. So that's kind of like if I were going to send you brownies, and every year I sent you brownies for your birthday. But then one year I'm like, I'm no longer going to send you the brownies. I'm just going to send you the recipe to make the brownies. It's exactly what he did. So
Right.
the problem never stopped. It just changed the form. As opposed to sending real fentanyl, now he sends the chemicals to make the fentanyl. So we've got to step up pressure there, and that's absolutely, we got to step up pressure there. And then where do those chemicals go? They primarily, at least, they go to Mexico. And we spoke about that earlier, but we need to continue to step up pressure there. I mean, we're talking bulk shipments of these chemicals coming into Mexico, and we know this. This isn't classified information that I'm sharing. We know this. We know that the majority of these chemicals are bulk shipped into the ports. These ports are full of corruption and control by primarily two cartels. And we know that they are then shipped, usually trucks, to different various locations around Mexico. And they have these huge manufacturing labs. And then they're smuggled into the US. And so, I mean, every step of that process, we need to target from an enforcement standpoint and from a diplomatic standpoint. I mean, I'm that's what I hope our government's doing with China and Mexico. And obviously they are, been working pretty aggressively with Mexico, given what we've seen in the last couple months. But I hope that increases. I really do. That's good for it's good for us.
Yeah. And say, like on the border, I'm not sure how it works, but the drug dogs with the officers, are they able to detect this, like through smells and stuff, or is it odorless?
No, it's odorless to us, but the dogs are, they're amazing, right? And
Yeah.
they can detect it, and our border seizures have continued to be pretty high. I think they've actually decreased this last month. That I've just now looking at the stats, we've seen a lot of changes at the border since this
Yeah.
election. But yeah, they are, the men and women who work for the Border Patrol and law enforcement, especially along the border, are doing everything they can to stop the flow of drugs into the U.S. They're using canines or using other technology, and I hope that continues to increase as well. And we know that the cartels are going to change their methods. They always adapt because they have no laws, they have no morals. It's all about money for them. So I suspect we'll see more, maritime shipments, on the water, drones, tunnels. They're going to continue to try to get drugs into this country any way possible, and we have to counter. We have to step up our game and counter that and continue to stop these drugs.
They certainly do go to all tactics, because here in the United Kingdom, the authorities keep reporting that big packages of cocaine keep washing up on the beaches, on the shores, and members of the public are finding them, like tons of the stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, maybe that's an operation gone wrong in the middle of the night. Somebody's supposed to be at a certain location and maybe it doesn't go to the right place or whatever happens. But it definitely shows you that the demand must be high. And I did see a documentary saying in the last decade, I think cocaine use in Britain has gone up by 800%, which is quite scary, when you've got children and, nieces and nephews and growing into this world. And yeah, it's quite worrying.
We've seen an increase in the United States as well, not only cocaine, but methamphetamine. We call them psychostimulants. I think the reason why we're seeing that, and the reason you're seeing that, is because we are seeing more legal stimulants being used by young people in this world. And that's driven by the pharmaceutical industry. So it's the same thing as in the 1990s with opioids. They were really pushing opioids. I mean, we went from, if you had an opioid prescription prior to 1996, you were probably dying, to here you go, here's 30, 60, 90 pills. And then that led into a widespread legal opioid problem in the United States, and that led to more heroin use. And then, like I said, that that led to fentanyl. So now let's look at stimulants like cocaine, and let's work that backwards. Here in the U.S., and just in the last maybe 10 years, we've seen about a 60% increase in legal stimulants. Legal. So if you look at some of the
Wow.
studies out there, I saw one that said 15% of all high school seniors, 12th graders, graduating seniors in the United States are now under some type of legal stimulant, legal from a doctor. So what happens when they graduate high school or college and they continue to use these drugs, or they turn to other stimulants? So we've seen a significant increase in cocaine and methamphetamine, especially by our young people. And I don't have the statistics in the UK, but I suspect that something similar is happening in there. If you're seeing more stimulant use, then it's more than
Yeah.
likely because of legal stimulant use has increased as well.
And is there more programs now within the school system to warn children? I mean, they don't listen half the time, but
Right.
some do, don't they? So I'm sure it's beneficial.
Some schools are doing more and more, and I work in quite a few schools, and I have friends who work in this space, and it's probably the most rewarding presentations you can give, because I mean, that's front lines when it comes to getting people to give them information and empower them to make decisions. But some schools are pretty good about it. Some schools are very welcoming to people like myself to come in and raise awareness. Some aren't. Some parents aren't. I can't tell you the number of parents I've talked to over the years who say things like "out of sight, out of mind," and they prefer to put their head in the sand,
Yeah.
and they think that's going to solve the problem. And unfortunately, it doesn't. I tell parents all the time, if you don't have these discussions, and I don't care if it's just about drugs, it can be about alcohol, it can be sex, everything. If you're not having these discussions, someone else is, and that other person, you can't control what they're saying, telling your children. So
Yeah.
with social media, or whether it's a drug trafficker or just some creep online, you know, why give them that opportunity to give your children bad information? Have these
Yeah.
discussions early and often.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to actually highlight the dangers and the risks associated with different compounds. I mean, some parents might just say, "Oh, drugs are bad," and not really say anything else on the matter. And then the child just thinks, "Oh, well, maybe it's not too bad." And then they hear from friends that are doing it and stuff. But I think if you sit a child down early on and just make it part of your conversation, and explain the dangers of different drugs and what they do to people, and maybe show examples, and I think it can be very powerful. I mean, I've got a 14-year-old boy myself,
Yeah,
and we've been having these conversations since way early on,
that's great.
and I just hope that it's enough to deter him in the future from ever falling prey to any kind of grooming into drugs and stuff.
And at the end of the day, what you're doing, you're empowering him to make that decision, because that, unfortunately, that your son may be in a situation where whether it's drugs or whether it's just, I don't know, vandalism, anything that you don't want him involved with. You are empowering him to make an informed decision. And that's exactly what I do. You're giving him the why. And when I go into schools, it's funny. One of the first things I always say is, "Hey, I'm not here to tell you not to use drugs." And of course, all the parents and the school people are like, "Oh no, who did we bring in? Some crazy guy, right?" And I follow up with, "Of course, I don't want you to use drugs, but my goal is to give you information and empower you to make a positive decision, which hopefully is the no." Um, but you have to make that decision. We're, as much as we'd like to be there, we're not going to be there when our children are faced with these very difficult decisions in life, right? But if they can go back and say, "Hey, Dad talked to me about this drug. He told me what it does. He told me about the consequences, what could happen to me, what could happen to my friends, my future, my dreams. This is a bad idea." But without that knowledge, what are we shooting from the hip? And that's not fair. That's a disservice to our children.
Yeah.
So that's exactly, we have to give them the reason. Going in there and saying, "Don't use drugs, they're bad," that doesn't work. It historically doesn't work. It's more damaging probably than anything. So
Yeah.
100%,
Absolutely.
when I talk to young people, my whole goal is to just give them the why. Tell them why they should say no, why they should make a better decision.
Yeah, it's very good of you to keep doing that. I think we need more people in the world like yourself, that's trying to fight back on this drug war and make an impact for future generations. And I just hope in the future that we do come to a point where the awareness is so strong that the consumption comes down, the demand comes down, and these guys can't make these huge profits. But sadly, at the moment, we do seem to be in a position where it's billions of dollars per year industry.
It is, and that's what's heartbreaking. I would absolutely welcome the opportunity to have no audiences, no schools, no one to talk to. Force me to get another job. I'm happy. I would be ecstatic. I used to say that in DEA and in law enforcement. I'd love that if we didn't have to exist. But unfortunately, there's evil out there, and we have to conquer it. And our children, our future is too important not to it's too important to ignore.
So is there anything else your organization's working on in regards to the talks and training that you're doing?
Yeah, we started, only 2MG started to address specifically fentanyl. That's why we even called it only 2MG, was the fact that a mere 2 milligrams of fentanyl was enough to kill the average human being. But we are certainly talking to people about other public health emergencies, problems, not just fentanyl, but we're starting to slowly dive into other things as well. Right now, I'm the only instructor. I'm pretty busy. Just to give you an idea, last year I did 50. My main presentation alone, I did 54 of them in 20 states. So I traveled quite a bit, and there's a cost involved in that as well. We are doing our best to scale our operation. I have a number of retired law enforcement officers, DEA agents who want to join this fight. And my volunteer network has increased tenfold. And there are people that want to get involved and that are engaged. The problem is, it's just, well, quite frankly, it's a money thing. It's expensive to travel to 20 states,
Yeah.
But
you're non-profit as well, aren't you? So you're not doing this for money, just to make the listeners and viewers aware. It's
no money at all.
Out of the love to make a better world, isn't it? To put it bluntly, definitely.
It is, I'm going to tell you something, and I say this not to brag by any stretch of the imagination, but I self-funded 90% of my travel last year. I don't charge for these conversations. And it's not because I'm rich or anything like that. I mean, I've been, my for-profit business has paid for my nonprofit. I wish I had other sources of income that could come in and take care of this and scale this. But this is too important not to have. Life shouldn't be hard. We can help people, and I've dedicated my life to public service, whether it's with, as a police officer, whether it's with DEA, or whether it's just as a person who's involved with a nonprofit now. And I hope I inspire change. I hope I give people a reason to have these conversations in their own homes and be force multipliers and reduce the demand for these dangerous substances that are killing our people. But I can't do it alone. I hope if someone's listening out there who wants to make a difference in their community, then just do it. Just do it. Just do something.
Yeah, definitely. I think if enough people got involved, then we could have an even huger impact, couldn't we, on society? And I think if you just keep spreading that awareness, eventually the numbers will build up, and there'll be more and more people like yourself trying to help people. I'm trying to do that myself with the show. I mean, I'm interviewing different types of people, all walks of life, but especially if I see something is going to be inspiring or to help push some sort of change. And when I was on the podcast guests thing and all the requests came through, I had like 101 requests. Wow. And yours stood out straight away. The first one I picked out because I thought that one it's important. Like you say, 100,000 people a year dying, and that's just in the United States.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. It's an important conversation, and I'm glad that I can provide my insight. And I know that, my background, my resume does give me these opportunities, and I want to seize on those opportunities. Your shows like yours those are your force multipliers. I mean, if just one person hears this message and goes home and talks to their children, that's a win, right? I mean, that's something that
Yeah.
we can feel good about. And we don't have to know about it. We just know it. If it happens, I tell you, it's a beautiful thing. It really is. And I think about some of the conversations I've had over the last couple of years doing this now, and some of the impact, and it just keeps me going. It really does. It gives me the motivation. It gives me the strength. I'm going to find the resources. We're going to scale this. One day we're going to get a lucky donor or something who's going to say, "Here you go," and we're going to. I'm telling you, it's. I'm a big hockey fan. Uh, uh, Wayne Gretzky once said, you gotta shoot the puck to make goals, right?" And let me tell you, I might be
Yeah.
missing the net a lot, but I'm there's a lot of pucks in front of me, and I'm going to keep on hitting them until more go in, and more people are helped because of this.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Yeah, I really, there's not much more you can ask for than that. To have people out there with nothing but compassion and empathy and love for the fellow human beings, just wanting to try and make the world a better place. Um, yeah, it's very commendable. So I commend you, sir, for all your work and everything that you're doing. It's really good. Have you got any future plans with your organization or anything coming up? Any interviews or shows?
Yeah, I've been doing more. Well, I've been doing more podcasts. Been doing more news interviews. In fact, I have one tonight live on news tonight. I had a couple with Fox that were canceled this past week, but that's okay. There'll be more opportunities. Anytime I can spread awareness, I'm happy to do. There is a project that we're working on. We're calling it Inside the Crisis, and what we plan on doing is actually going onto the streets and talking to people that are impacted by drugs and just the different things, and get their feedback. I've dealt with a lot of those folks over the years. I've dealt with a lot of them over the last couple of years just doing these presentations. But now we want to see if we can get some of them to agree to go on camera and tell their story and share their story, share their experiences, and really dive into the human experience and bring that back to people and let them know that
Yeah.
this is what's impacting our communities.
I interviewed a guy on the last episode who had many years of addiction, awful traumas in life, and he's now out the other side and he's helping people. He's involved with a homeless charity and he's doing a lot of work in the church. And yeah, it's really inspiring, to hear people's stories of how severe their addiction was, how they've got out the other side, and now what life's like for them. I think if people who are going through these struggles hear these testimonies, then it really does inspire hope, doesn't it?
It does. It's an amazing thing, and we can't give up on these people. We can't. There are a plethora of examples, just like the one you shared, where people struggle with these real life, problems, and they turn the drugs, and then they find a way through it. They see the light on the other side, and they do amazing things, and it's so many of them actually go back to help others because they know there's hope, right? And that's a beautiful thing. Some of the volunteers, some of the people I work with are exactly what you described. People who have struggled with addiction, substance use disorder, and they have empathy in their heart and they want to help people. And it's a beautiful thing. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've said to people in my life in the past that I've seen growing up who've struggled with drugs and stuff, and I've always tried to put them on the right path and be a good friend and not judge them too much, and understand what they're going through. And, like you say, when you do see the progression and the change, it's just like, wow. And then they'll be thanking you, thanks for sticking by me through my darkest times. And then I'll try and tell them, well, maybe you could help people, because you've been there, you've experienced it. Why not get involved? And I think for a lot of previous addicts, actually speaking and trying to help other people is like a form of therapy, isn't it? And it makes sure that they don't slip down that path again, because they're going to look stupid to all the people they're helping. But it does keep them grounded, doesn't it?
Yeah, it keeps them accountable, right? You hit the nail on the head. Stigma, and that's something that we know through a lot of research and just talking to people that a lot of people who are struggling with substance use are not getting help because of the stigma. because they don't want to be looked at as, oh, they failed. They did something wrong in life. So
Yeah.
what a disservice we're doing to these people. Shouldn't we reach out and offer them a hand and say, hey, we know you're struggling. I mean, that's where that empathy goes a long way. And you may not agree. I'm not saying that we're going to agree with the choices they made, and that we're saying that's okay to use drugs or alcohol, or at least abuse these things. But what we are saying to them is, we understand that you're battling with something. We understand that you're having some troubles here. But guess what? Your life is beautiful, and you're a good person, and I should say, you are a person worth saving. And if people would just offer their hand and try to be a little more empathetic, I think more people will be willing to say, yeah, I do need help. I
Yeah.
need to figure out how I can get better. But so many of them, are in the shadows. It's we we stigmatize people. We call them addicts. We call them junkies. We call them, we say all these words. If I had cancer, would you call me, hey, cancer, how you doing? No, you would never say that. You would say, I struggle with cancer. But someone who's struggling with addiction, I mean, just by mere calling them, hey, you junkie, you loser, or whatever, the different words that we use in society. I mean, those are, look, I'm not a tree hugger. I'm not someone who says that these things aren't bad, but I am someone who cares. And I think that's the difference, right? We got to stop stigmatizing these people and just offer a little bit of empathy.
Yeah. So I watched this guy, as I was saying earlier, who goes around to different towns and cities, and he interviews like the homeless people and what we'd say like the addicts on the streets and stuff. And it's so sad, when you actually hear their stories and you see them on camera talking, and you realize that, gosh, some of these people can end up in these situations so rapidly. I mean, they might have been married, had children, had a decent job, and then within weeks, something's gone terribly wrong. They're on the streets. And like you said earlier, like a comfort thing, they might turn to drugs to hide the pain and depression. And then it's a vicious cycle, isn't it? So
Very, very vicious.
it's very sad.
Very vicious. Yeah. Yeah. It's depressing and that's kind of our aim as well, is to tell that story, is to get people to understand that this isn't someone who just said, hey, I'm gonna use drugs. I wanna destroy all the relationships in my life. I wanna go to jail. I wanna overdose. These aren't conversations people are having with themselves. They're, like I said, they're coping with some type of pain or trauma, and they don't have an ability, or the treatment is not clear to them, or how they can get real help is not clear to them. And
Yeah.
we continue to stigmatize these people, and there's more we can do.
Would you say that mental health is a major plays a major part in this?
I would. Again, that's one of those things that we're really not addressing too much as well, right? We know that there's a lot of mental illness and trauma and things that are impacting people from very young ages, and people experience uh, things differently that could impact your mental health.
Of
So
course, yeah.
yeah,
That's not to say like these people are crazy, but they've been through situations and, like you said, traumas and stuff. And I think the worst ones we see are the ones people who are abused as children and who see awful things as well. Those seem to be statistically the ones that grow up with more severe addictions, don't they? Which is
they
kind of
do.
sad as well.
100%. And then the thing is when they turn to things like drugs or alcohol, people don't realize that now they're altering their brain, especially young people. They're altering their brain development. So now we have things like, psychosis or schizophrenia or other problems that are a result of the prolonged drug use. So now we have those mental illnesses that are you know exaggerated. They've increased because of the drug use. So now we've just compounded the problem, right? And that's why we got to get to it before it all starts. We got to figure out how to reduce that demand and
Yeah.
address these evil things that are happening in our society.
And protect the children. For sure.
Yeah. Yes, 100%.
If anybody wants to get involved with any of your projects or speak to you or anything, is there any way they can contact you? Maybe want to share like your website or anything?
Yeah, please. My website is only2mg.com. So it's www.only, the word only, and then just the number two. It's not spelled out. So just two, and then mg. So mg stands for milligrams, then .com. So it's only2mg.com, only2mg.com. On that website, you'll have more about me. You'll have more about what my schedule's on there, what we currently offer. And then if you want to get a hold of me, there's a way to do that via the website. Pretty easy to get a hold of. If I don't contact you right away, it's probably because I'm on a podcast or I'm speaking to an audience or I'm on an airplane. So
Yeah.
love to have the conversation, love to help people, love to travel. So
Yeah, well, if you ever end up in the United Kingdom, we'll have to get you in for an in-studio interview for sure. That'd be cool.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. Let's schedule it. I was just in Germany a few weeks ago, so international travel is not a.
Oh wow. Well,
100%
I'm
on
just
board.
I'm just outside of Manchester, like
Okay.
northwest United Kingdom. So yeah, keep
I've
that in
only
mind
been
if you're ever over this way.
We'll set it up.
Yeah, definitely. And maybe we can touch base in the future on this. Maybe if there's any developments in terms of this drug war and any sort of progress, or if it goes the other way, or if there's anything I can do to help raise awareness, or in terms of content creations and putting things together, I can certainly get involved and help free of charge, just to help, definitely.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you very much. Let's stay in contact, and yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us and reaching out. Really appreciated. And I just hope that this has been touching to people out there that are maybe struggling with these addictions. And I hope that this is enough to deter you from going down that path. If you're feeling in a bad place in life and you feel like you need a drug or you need some sort of escapism, there is other things out there. There's video games, there's movies, there's comedy shows, there's all sorts of stuff. And there is people you can talk to. Many people think that they don't have anybody and people are going to judge them. But I think that if they reach out in the darkest hour, they'll find that there's always going to be somebody. Maybe the person that you don't think wants to hear or wants to help will be there, because I think that's really important for people to understand that, to just pick up the phone, and go see somebody, explain how you're feeling. There's no shame. At the end of the day, you got to stay alive, it's important. And the connections we make around us can be enough to keep you on the right path, can't they? I'd say.
I agree. Thank you for the opportunity.
Have you got any kind of closing up comments or anything you wanted to say before we tie it up?
Take care of people. Start with the people around you and then branch out from there. So yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to share my story and the work I'm doing.
No, it's absolutely my pleasure. I was telling people that I was having a ex-DEA agent onto the show, and they're saying, "Oh, you've got Hank from Breaking Bad." So I made a little post today saying I've got Hank Schrader up next on the podcast. Only joking, but he's the next best thing. And actually, my son, before we closed, my son wanted me to ask you that. We see DEA in things like the Breaking Bad show and stuff. How accurate is that to what happens in the DEA?
Breaking Bad had a lot of Hollywood in it. What's funny is the first few episodes, I love Breaking Bad, by the way. I thought it was a brilliant show. But the first few episodes with Hank, I was like, okay, they're getting some of the terminology and some of the internal stuff with DEA wrong. And if you're a DEA agent, you would recognize it. Public's not going to realize that. But then they must have had some people on set who were like, "Whoa, time out. We need to fix a couple little details that make a difference." And so it started to get a lot more accurate on how they portrayed, Hank and the work. But at the end of the day, a lot of Hollywood involved in the story.
Of course.
But
There's a
great show, right? I think.
Yeah.
I actually, one of my favorite. I think the writing was brilliant. I love how they, Jesse. Just give you my little feedback here. Jesse.
Yeah.
He, Jesse was a good person, but he was constantly labeled as as a loser, as someone who who was less desirable, right? And he just kept on thinking, well, I guess that's my role in life. And then you have Walt, the teacher, the prominent teacher and father. And at the end of the day, I mean, he was garbage, right? I mean, you had this absolute reversal of roles, right? That I thought it was brilliant. I could go on and on and on. I enjoyed the show. But as far as the DEA perspective and just law enforcement and how everything works, yeah, a lot of Hollywood.
Yeah. Well, I think most of us in the United Kingdom didn't know what methamphetamine was until that show.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd never heard of it previous to watching that series. And I mean, now we hear cases of it, not as much as other drugs, but it definitely does seem to be getting more and more. I think I heard a story the other week where somebody had ordered some off the dark web in the United Kingdom, had a load of this crystal stuff delivered to them, and the police tracked them down, and they made like a little TV show out of it.
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean, we are catching up, aren't we? So this conversation has definitely been important to even my friends and family and people that listen in the United Kingdom to the current trends in the States and what could be possible for this country, and to spread that knowledge down through the children as well.
That's the most important thing we can do.
Yep, definitely. Well, thanks, Brian, for coming on to iMedia. I really appreciate you reaching out. And if anybody's listening to this on one of the podcast platform apps, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, just to mention a few, you can find the video version of this on YouTube, clips on TikTok, and equally, if you're watching this and prefer to listen to podcasts, you can get it wherever you get your podcasts. So this has been Brian Townsend on episode 23. And yeah, thank you so much, Brian. It's been eye-opening. Sad circumstances that we meet, but ultimately very important, isn't it?
Absolutely. Thank you again for the opportunity.
More than welcome. Thank you. Thanks for listening to iMedia. See you all soon.